Hello everyone, my name is Azrika and I want to welcome you back to my channel. And if this is your first time hanging out with me, I'm so excited that we could chill today. And today we're actually going to be talking about how our mindset, especially while we're in a period of waiting, is so important. So let's get right into it. So in the last video I did, I talked about how I've kind of just been studying the story of Joseph a lot. And this video is kind of a continuation of that. But to Joseph's story, I'm adding or comparing the stories of Abraham and Jacob. And today we're talking about just how important our mindset is while we're in the process of waiting. I'm learning, or I've learned, that it is so important to decide or to commit to just waiting on God, to just let God do what he does best. Committing to wait is an important element, but how we wait is also as important, if not often more important. And why do I say that? Well, as I continue to study the story of Joseph, there were some things that I realized proved or showed the way Joseph carried his trial. He carried his period of waiting. I saw the pattern of God separating Joseph anytime the devil or someone tried to, tarnish his character or pull him from his ultimate purpose. What I mean by that, his brothers wanted to kill him, and God separated Joseph from that environment via him being sold into slavery. Potiphar's wife wanted to sleep with him, and it would ultimately put a stain on Joseph's character and reputation, and God separated him by allowing him to be in jail. Because Potiphar's wife was probably never gonna stop. She was gonna keep trying, just as much as Joseph's brothers were probably never gonna stop hating him. So God, it seems, always separates Joseph, although it seems like a downgrade. It's really like a place of safety. And it is because of the initial separation, Joseph being sold into slavery, and then the second separation, Joseph being thrown into jail for something he didn't do, that he meets the baker and the wine bearer and ends up becoming second in command. Why I'm bringing this up, because this pretty much repeats what was said in the last video, and you can check that one out. But I realized that through all of this time, you could see that Joseph's mindset wasn't one of bitterness and or anger. If you notice, everywhere Joseph went, he was trusted. Even though he technically was in bondage, the people who were above him saw such a beautiful quality in him. And that's not something you typically see in someone who chooses to hold on to hate, who chooses not to forgive, who chooses just to be angry about life and situations all the time. Joseph was so loved by the people around him that even in the midst of his bondage, he was elevated to high places. One of the things I thought about is, why didn't Potiphar kill Joseph when his wife accused him of coming onto her or forcing himself on her? And I think it's because Potiphar probably knew Joseph's character and knew this was so outside of him. Joseph carried a character of excellence, even though he was in the process of waiting. The dreams that God had given Joseph, imagine if he spent his time being like, man, what was it about? Aren't I supposed to be something great? Aren't I supposed to be this amazing person? Imagine if that's the mindset that Joseph took. You would readily be able to see that in Joseph's story, because he wouldn't have been as trusted. Joseph, I think, carried a spirit of humility and trust in God. And why I say this is because I think of two other characters in the Bible that were also given promises: Jacob and Abraham, and how they handled the promises of God. Jacob, who was promised the birthright, ended up stealing it from Esau. He just stole everything from Esau, really. And as a result, he had to run to his mother's family member's house for his life. And I don't think that's how God intended for him to have that blessing. It wasn't meant for him to get that promise in that way. And the same thing goes with Abraham. Abraham, who was promised to be the father of many, many, many nations, you could tell that he was more concerned with the promise than with the one who gave the promise, because he took matters into his own hands. I've always liked the juxtaposition between Joseph, Abraham, and Jacob, because you see that all of them were given dreams or promises. All of them were given a glimpse into the future, but two of them, instead of just waiting patiently on God through the highs and lows, took matters in their own hand. And as a result, not only did they suffer, but others suffered as well. But when Joseph was given the dream, even though that dream led him to unlikely places, the thing that Joseph carried the most with him was just a presentness, a day-to-day trust in God. And this is why I know that your mindset matters. If you are out here carrying anger and bitterness, unlike Joseph, you won't ever be able to excel in the midst of your struggle. So one of the verses that made me realize just how much Joseph walked around through the midst of trial with such grace and patience in God is Genesis chapter 40, verses 5 through 7. And pretty much this is with the cupbearer and the baker. And Joseph, now having spent some time in the prison, had been made like in charge of all the other prisoners. And it says, while they were in prison, Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker each had a dream one night, and each dream had its own meaning. When Joseph saw them the next morning, he noticed that they both looked upset. Why do you look so worried today? He asked them. And I remember reading that and just being like, yo, so Joseph, who had been sold into slavery by his brothers, worked his way up in Potiphar's house, got accused of rape, got thrown into jail, worked his way to the top of the jail. How does he have the presentness of mind to consider someone else's pain? How is he not bitter and angry? How is he not pissed off at the way life turned out? It made me realize that in the middle of the highs and lows, like all of this time, Joseph was just like going through such hardship. Like he wasn't in his father's home anymore. He was in a foreign land. He was property. And not just that, he was accused of rape recently. And Joseph is still the person that sees someone hurting and his concern is to go up to them and wonder and ask them why they're struggling, why they're in pain. And it was reading that verse that made me realize, like, yo, Joseph, through the many years of being a slave and being a prisoner, he really was not focused on the dream that God had given him. He wasn't focused on the injustice that was done to him. He was in a process of waiting. Yes, I'm sure Joseph hoped for justice. I'm sure Joseph prayed that something would turn out right, but he didn't make that the forefront of his mind. He instead made it his duty to honor God everywhere he went, whether it was Potiphar's house as a slave or in prison as a prisoner in charge. How you go through your trials, how you live life while you are waiting, your mindset matters. Because if Joseph once again was like, dang it, this isn't fair, I shouldn't be in this jail. If Joseph was like, oh, I shouldn't be here, he would have never been open to serving and loving those around him. And it is because of his willingness to be caring that he met the cupbearer and the baker, and meeting them, although it took 2 years after this encounter, enabled him to be in the palace. And I've noticed it's like dope because God was setting Joseph up all the time. He was in the process of just doing great things for Joseph. And I know that it was God because timing and location repeats itself. Why were the slave buyers walking just in that random? In fact, Joseph wasn't even supposed to be in that location. It was because his brothers who were supposed to be in the field left and went to that place. I believe it's Dothan. They went to that place that it ended up that the slave traders happen to be passing through that location. That's divine. That's nothing but God. Another thing, Joseph ends up being sold to Potiphar. And it is because he was sold to Potiphar, that he was a slave in Potiphar's house, that he ended up, when homegirl decided to be trifling little harlot and accuse him of rape, he ended up being thrown into the prison where all of the Pharaoh's high men were. Like, it is because he was sold to Potiphar, which sucked, and homegirl was stupid, which also sucked, that he ended up in prison with some of Pharaoh's high people. So again, timing and location. It just so happened that Potiphar's wife decided to be a little jazzy, to just be a little harlot in the time that the cupbearer and the baker were in the prison. Again, timing and location. So just even as I consider that, yes, I can see that God was lining it up, but Joseph's attitude, Joseph's mode of operation, his way of going about life even in the midst of waiting and trials and disappointment and difficulty, it had as much to do with the fact that he ended up being second in command as God's divine orchestration. And I hope you're catching this, because God is in the process of working on your behalf. But who you are while you wait, who you allow yourself to be, how you allow yourself to learn the lessons will have a direct effect on who you will be when God does open that door. So I don't know where you are, but allow yourself to learn. Don't be like Abraham and Jacob, who focused so much on the promise, it became their idol. It became the thing that they were willing to break character. They were willing to do things against God's will just to get the promise that God gave them. Why? It was God who gave the promise to you in the first place, right? Whatever this promise is, whatever this thing you're waiting on is, whether it's a job, whether it's a spouse, kids, it is God's desire for you in the first place. So don't all of a sudden take it from his hands. You aren't the one that came up with the idea. It was what God wanted to do for you. So I'm learning that these promises, these things we're waiting for, when God gives us a glimpse into the future, what he wants to bless us with, it's an invitation to work with and wait for God, not an act of entitlement like I deserve this. This is what I deserve, because God is the one that he's working it out. So while you wait, allow yourself to grow. Allow your character to grow. Maintain your honor, maintain your integrity, so when God does bless you, there won't be that tarnish on your character. Ultimately, God is dope. He was able to not undo all of the mistakes that Abraham and Jacob did, but God did save Jacob's life because Esau wanted to kill him. And God spoke to Esau like, chill out, that's my homie. You can't be out here killing him. And then with Hagar and Ishmael, when they got kicked out, because Sarah eventually was able to bear Isaac, God came to them and promised that he will make them great as well. So God, he be out here undoing our crap and stuff, but it's such a beautiful thing if, like Joseph, we allow ourselves to be present, to just trust God. So when we do get made second in command, or when God does bring to fruition the thing he promised us, we don't have that stain, we don't have that tarnish on our character, but instead we can look back like Joseph, which I really just love this phrase, like, man, like whatever it is that the devil meant for evil, God kind of turned it around and made it into something so amazing. So if you're in a period of waiting on a promise you believe God has given you, waiting on a hope and waiting on a dream, who you are while you wait, your mindset while you wait matters. It will directly affect who you become when that promise is granted. So don't just commit to wait, but commit to waiting well. And let your mindset be one of trust and faith and hope, not in the promise, but in the giver of the promise. Guys, I'm so excited that we could hang out today. Thank you so much for stopping by. Like this video if you like it. Share this with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe, ring a bell so that when I put out more videos, you'll get notifications. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I love you guys, and I will see you soon. Mwah!